Her name was Wren, and nobody in that hall had come to see her. She stood at the very back of the Coronation crowd, wedged between a pillar and a stranger's elbow, wearing a borrowed gray dress that itched at the collar. 3 years ago, she'd been a healer's assistant in a border village that no longer existed. Now she cleaned linens in the palace kitchens and was only in the Great Hall today because someone needed to carry water for the fainting nobles who couldn't handle standing for 6 hours in ceremonial heat. Nobody looked at her. That was how she liked it. Everybody looked at him. King Kale stood at the center of the dais, and the whole hall seemed to lean away from him without moving an inch. He had ruled for 9 years and claimed no mate, trusted no council member fully, and, according to kitchen gossip, hadn't smiled since his coronation day. Wolves who served him for a decade still bowed their heads when he passed, not from respect alone, but from something closer to fear. He was magnificent and untouchable, like a blade nobody was allowed to hold. Wren wasn't thinking about him. She was thinking about the man near the western doors. She'd noticed him twice now, once near the kitchens an hour ago, once here, standing too still, watching the king's guards instead of the king. His hand kept drifting to his coat, like he was checking something was still there. Nobody else seemed to notice. Nobles rarely looked at anything below their own eye line, and he was dressed like a servant, same as her. Invisible people saw other invisible people. That was the only reason she saw him at all. She should have said something. She opened her mouth to find guard. That was when the heat hit her. It came from nowhere, a wave rolling up from her chest to her skull, sudden and overwhelming, like standing too close to a fire that wasn't there. Her vision blurred at the edges. She told herself it was the crowded hall, the incense, the hours on her feet since dawn. She did not know that 3 feet beneath her ribs, an old wound from the border raids had been quietly reopening for a week, bleeding slow and silent beneath skin that had scarred over wrong. She did not know that something in her blood, faint and dormant her whole life, had just recognized something in his. The floor rose to meet her. The last thing she saw was Kale turning, not toward the ceremony, not toward the crown being carried in on its velvet cushion, but toward her, half a heartbeat before she even fell, as though he'd felt it before she had. Then guards' hands reached for her, and a voice cracked across the hall like a whip. No one touches her but me. Northern Court did not move. His general tried first. General Rowe approached carefully, the way one approaches a wolf mid-hunt, and suggested, gently, that the healers should take her, that the king should sit, that the crown still waited on its cushion untouched. Kale didn't answer. He didn't even blink. He stood in the center of the healer's chamber with Wren cradled against his chest like something the world might try to take from him. And the only sound he made was a low, constant rumble in his throat that no one in that room had ever heard King make. Lady Ashgrove tried next. She was the council's favorite candidate for queen, beautiful and precise, and she had spent 3 years positioning herself for this exact day. She swept into the room with her voice already sharpening. Your Majesty, this is a servant girl. Whatever this is, it can wait until... She didn't finish. Kale turned his head 1 inch toward her, and something in his gold eyes made her stop speaking entirely and step back toward the door. Council members whispered outside. Some called it a spell. Some called it madness. One old advisor, gray-haired and quiet, simply watched through the doorway and said nothing at all, because he was old enough to remember the last time a king's wolf had gone still like this, generations ago, and he knew exactly what it meant. No one offered Kale food. He wouldn't have taken it. No one offered him a chair. He wouldn't have sat. His hand stayed pressed flat over the wound at her ribs the entire time, keeping pressure there without being told how, as if his body already understood her better than the healers did. At one point his thumb moved, just slightly, tracing a small crescent scar near her collarbone, old and faded, the kind of scar nobody stops to notice on a servant girl. He noticed it like he'd been looking for it his whole life. When Wren's eyes finally opened, the room was too bright and too full of strangers. Panic came first, sharp and instant. She didn't know this room, didn't know why her ribs ached, didn't know why she was being held. She pushed against the chest beneath her, twisting to get free, whispering an apology to whoever this was for whatever she'd interrupted. His arms didn't loosen. Instead, his voice dropped low, rough from 3 hours of silence, meant only for her. But the chamber was dead quiet, and every word carried. Mine, until the last breath leaves me. The healers froze. Lady Ashgrove's teacup shattered on the floor. No king had spoken the old bonding words in over 200 years. By morning, Ren understood something new. Invisibility had been a gift, and it was gone. The kitchen staff who used to hand her extra bread now looked away when she passed. A noblewoman's maid spat near her feet in the corridor and called it an accident. Someone left a dead sparrow outside the guest chamber they'd moved her into, a chamber far too grand for a girl who used to sleep above the laundry room. She understood, without anyone explaining it, that being chosen by the king did not make her safe. It made her a target with a crown-shaped bullseye painted over her heart. An old healer named Mira finally told her the truth, speaking low and fast like the words might get her in trouble. The bonding words Kale had spoken weren't a decision. They were instinct, old wolf magic, older than the crown itself, that recognized a true mate the moment their souls came close enough to touch. Kale hadn't chosen to say them. His wolf had chosen for him. The second Ren collapsed in that hall, and once spoken, the bond couldn't be unspoken. Myra's voice dropped even lower. No king has had a true mate in 6 generations. Half this court doesn't believe it's even real anymore. The other half is terrified it is. Lady Ashgrove's first move came disguised as kindness, a servant sent with tea, a gift from the council to help the future queen recover. Ren didn't drink it. She'd grown up in a village where poison smelled faintly of almonds if you knew to notice, and this did. She said nothing. She simply set it down and watched the servant's face for the flicker of guilt that confirmed everything. That evening, Kale found her on the private balcony, staring out at a court that no longer felt like it belonged to her, because it never had. "You didn't drink it," he said. "Not a question. You knew. I can smell almonds from across a room now. Apparently that's new too." A pause, almost human. "Everything about you is new to me." She turned to face him fully for the first time since waking in his arms. Up close, the coldness the whole kingdom feared looked less like cruelty and more like a man who'd spent 9 years making sure nothing could touch him, and had just discovered, in one afternoon, that something already had. "Why me?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer with words. He reached out, slow enough that she could stop him, and touched the small crescent scar at her collarbone. The one from her village, from the fire, from the night she should have died. "Because I've been looking for this scar in every room I've ever stood in," he said. "I just didn't know it until you fell." Behind them, unnoticed, Mira entered holding the untouched teacup, now wrapped carefully in cloth, evidence in her trembling hands. "Your Majesty," she whispered, "this isn't the first poison found in this palace this month. The other cup was meant for you." Kale's protection turned into a blade overnight. 2 guards who'd been careless with Ren's safety were dismissed by dawn. A council member who'd laughed at the laundry girl playing queen found himself stripped of his seat by midday. No explanation given beyond the king's flat stare. Kale doubled her guard, moved her rooms next to his own, and began attending council sessions with a stillness that made even loyal advisors choose their words like they were walking across ice. He wasn't ruling anymore. He was guarding, and the difference terrified the court more than the bond itself had. "You're making it worse," Ren told him, 3 days in, watching him dismiss another servant for standing too close to her door. "I'm keeping you alive. You're making everyone believe I need to be controlled to be protected. That I'm a problem to be managed, not a person." She stood, meeting the gold of his eyes without flinching, something she hadn't dared do a week ago. "I survived a border raid that killed everyone I loved. I know how to watch a room, Kale. Let me help you find whoever did this. Don't just cage me while you hunt them alone." He studied her for a long moment, something shifting behind his composure. It was the first time anyone had argued with him and lived to see him consider it instead of punish it. That night, Myra's investigation bore fruit. The poison traced back to a rare northern root, one that grew in exactly one territory, the lands of House Ashgrove. Not petty jealousy, Cale realized grimly. House Ashgrove's alliance with the crown had been failing for years, their trade routes collapsing, their influence fading with every season. Cale refused to marry Lady Ashgrove and secure their house's future. A true mate bond wasn't just inconvenient for them. It was financial ruin, generations of position gone in one afternoon. That evening, Cale sat beside Ren for the first time. Not standing guard, not pacing, just sitting shoulder to shoulder on the balcony steps, watching the sun disappear behind the training yards. He told her, quietly, about growing up motherless, about a father who taught him that closeness was weakness. She listened without pity, and when she finally rested her head against his shoulder, he went still, not from fear this time, but from something gentler, unfamiliar, and entirely new. The doors burst open. Lady Ashgrove stood in the frame, dressed in formal challenge colors, her voice carrying down the corridor like a blade drawn in public. Cale Ashwood, by the old law, I challenge your bonded claim before the full court at dawn. Choose her, and you choose to break 6 generations of alliance with my house. And I promise you, your majesty, my house will not fall alone. Our claim to mate in 9 years of ruling. Not coldness, but fear, watching his own father wither after losing a mate to politics just like this. Why 3 hours had mattered so much he couldn't move. Because some buried part of him had been waiting his whole life for someone worth being still for, and he refused to lose the feeling for even a second. He knelt before the full court the next morning, not as king, but as a man, and declared her not just as mate, but co-ruler by bond right, a title unclaimed in 6 generations. The court bowed. This time, no one whispered. That night, on the same balcony, Cale finally sat. Not standing guard, not holding her like something he might lose. Just sitting, unhurried, her hand resting easy in his, both of them watching the same stars. A king who had once stood frozen for 3 hours, now completely, quietly at peace.